Alex Hormozi eats 200 grams of protein per day. Outside of that, he pretty much eats whatever he wants. We're gonna break down his diet and we're gonna talk about this strategy, how this might work for you, but we also might pick apart a few things because it all depends on what you're doing. There is some nuance to be talked about here.
What I'm not saying is this is the most scientifically researched, whatever. I'm just sharing what worked for me.
All right, first cover that. I appreciate that. And this is in no way, shape, or form bagging on Alex. He's a cool dude. I actually agree with much of his diet. The reason I even do these is to provide context. I am not a reaction video type person. I like to provide context because a lot of times YouTube's about just getting the information out there and it lacks the scientific rigor. Just so happens that a lot of what he's talking about, what he does, actually has some scientific merit behind it.
All you have to do is multiply your body weight. So I'm gonna use 200 pounds as my average because it's easy with math. So let's say I'm a 200 pound guy and I wanna get leaner. I'm gonna go to moderate cut, which is the second from the bottom here of these three, which you've got 10, 11, 12. And I'm gonna say 10 because it's easy math. And so I'm gonna multiply 200, which is my weight, times 10, which is this coefficient, which gives me, drumroll please, 2,000 calories.
There's actually decent merit to this. And it kind of parallels, I mean, the other way you find it is there's something called the Harris-Benedict formula, which we're not gonna go into detail here. This is a rough outline that I think works pretty darn well. You see, if you tell someone that they are going to just multiply their current weight by 10, for the average person, that's going to put you at a decent calorie amount, right? I'm 180 pounds. If I multiplied my calories by 10, I would be at 1,800 calories. What I would suggest is that you use this as sort of your number for your basal metabolic rate if you think you are a relatively in shape, healthy person. Okay, so this would absolutely not apply for someone that is 350 pounds, right? If they're 350 pounds, it does not mean that if you multiply by 10, your basal metabolic rate is 3,500 calories. Alex, just to make it very, very clear here, he's talking about total calories with this amount, total calories. So he's 200 pounds, he wants to mildly lose weight, he's gonna multiply that by 10 and end up at 2,000. That's his total calories. Most formulas that look at this are looking to find what's called your basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories you burn just at rest, right? So he's got a very abbreviated way of doing this to find total calories. I don't know if that would work for everybody because people's metabolisms are wildly different and your amount of lean body mass tremendously plays a role there. The amount of lean body mass that you have, if you took someone that was 200 pounds at 7% body fat compared to someone that was 200 pounds at 35% body fat, they're gonna have wildly different metabolisms. So what I suggest doing is knowing your phenotype, okay? Knowing your body type. If you are a lean person and you're just trying to manipulate calories up or down, I think that multiplying your weight by 10 to find your basal metabolic rate is a great place to start. But then from there, we take a piece out of Dr. Tommy Wood's playbook. Dr. Tommy Wood is someone that I respect tremendously. I probably respect him more than just about anybody in this industry. He's nuanced, he's real, but he also knows how to get people excited about things. He says, increase your calories until you gain about a pound of fat and then back it off 10% or so from there. Like just back it off. Like you always want to find that upper threshold. So if you're lean enough, eat as much as you can and move as much as you can until you find I start gaining a little bit, then reel it back. And that's how you know where your baseline is. You're not going to be able to find your basal metabolic rate really, really well without going into like a metabolic chamber. It's really, really tough. Okay, so all intents and purposes, this works if you are moderately fit, if you are moderately lean, I'd say under 18% body fat. After that, you might not want to follow that scale. You might need to adjust a little bit. Let's keep going.
We've got 2,000 calories. Great. Here's step 3. You multiply your weight, 200 pounds again, you multiply it by 1. Really hard math. Means 200 grams of protein. Some of the science nerds are gonna be like, you can only metabolize 0.7 grams per... Don't give a shit. Every pound of lean meat, white fish, ground turkey breast, 96.4 ground beef, shrimp, whatever. A pound is 100 grams of protein. So if you need 200 grams.
Fairly accurate there. And the 1 gram a pound or 1 gram per pound of body weight for protein is a good place to start. And he's right, like the 0.7 grams of protein per kilogram of body, no. I mean, just so you know, the recommended daily allowance is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. That is dismally low. Dr. Rhonda Patrick, when I interviewed her, she was like, hey, you might want to safely double that, right? So that's 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. Okay, now there's more than 2 pounds in a kilogram. So realistically, you should increase that even more, right? So in Alex's case, 1 gram per pound of body weight. If you're trying to build, I would suggest 1 gram per pound of body weight that you want to weigh. If you're trying to lose, still the 1 gram per pound is adequate. But if you have a lot of body fat on you and you're 300 pounds and you're 5'9", 300 grams of protein is not necessarily what you want to do. Now, interestingly enough, eating additional protein, it's really hard for that to convert to fat. But what it does is, in sort of a reciprocal way, it encourages other substrates to be used as fuel. But it's significantly harder or be used as storage, I should say. It's significantly harder to overeat other macronutrients when you're eating a lot of protein, right? So that's a very important piece to look at there. So what I would suggest here is, yes, generally lean into the 1 gram per pound of body weight. Otherwise, if you have the ability to get a DEXA scan, try to eat 1.2 to 1.5 grams per pound of lean body mass. That's the ultimate hack. If you have the ability to go spend a couple $100 and get a DEXA scan and you know where your lean body mass is, eating like 1.2 to 1.5 grams per pound of lean body mass per day, that gets you to a really good spot in my opinion. Quick side note, when it comes down to protein, one of the quickest ways to get protein into your diet, and I still consider it somewhat of a whole food, is whey protein. It is proven time and time again as one of the more potent supplements that's out there. My preferred protein powder and way to get additional protein in is Bowmar Nutrition's whey protein powder. This stuff is sweetened with allulose, so there's no artificial sweeteners. It is unbelievably light and fluffy. Like when it mixes up, it tastes like a milkshake. That is a 15% off discount link. The reason I mention this is not because it's the most cutting edge, this and that. It's the best tasting and it doesn't have garbage in it. And it is the one that I legitimately use. So people ask, what do you use? This is what I use. I like stuff that tastes good. I would rather have a treat from a protein shake than go get junk, because I can have a protein shake that tastes like that treat, but doesn't have the negative impact like that treat. The game is protein. And at the end of the day, if we can get it in a way that we enjoy, we will be less likely to choose junk that might do actual metabolic damage. Whey protein is demonstrated to be very effective. It's essentially proven, it's delicious, and it digests fast. So that link down below is 15% off. It'll hands down be the best protein you've ever had. Link down below underneath this video.
We have 2,000 calories, and we know we have to eat 200 grams of protein. All you have to do is figure out what 2 pounds of meat you want to eat or where you want to get your 200 grams of protein from and figure out how many calories are in that thing. These 2 pounds of meat are both turkey. I eat turkey for both meals, crazy. These are both 560. I know that that's 1120. That's how many calories I have of protein that I eat in my day. So I subtract my calories associated with those meals from my 2,000 in this example, and I would have 880 calories left over. Those 880 calories.
Okay, I get that. First of all, just so you know the math, there's 4 calories per gram of protein. So basically that's what he's figuring out there. He's like, if I have 200 grams of protein, then multiply that by 4, that's, yada, yada, right? So you're gonna end up at whatever amount you have there. Now in this particular case, he's doing some math here, but general rule of thumb, 4 calories per gram of protein, right? So if you have 100 grams of protein, that's 400 calories. If you have 200 grams of protein, it's about 800 calories. Room for wiggling there depending on fat content, right? So that's where things get, like his numbers might seem a little off. Well, yeah, if you're gonna do ground steak or your ground beef or your ground turkey and it's a 93% lean, you've got some fat in it. So yes, definitely factor that in. What he's getting at here is he finds his protein as his base. And that is exactly what I think people should be doing. If you find your protein as your base, everything else falls into place to a degree. Let's hear what he has to say.
Here's the magic of how this works. You can do whatever you want with them. If you need to go out to a business dinner, you want to have drinks, cool. Well, cocktail's probably 150 calories. Have 2 of those and have a 500 calorie meal of whatever you want. Because again, you've already got your protein in. You could just stay at home and have an entire pint of ice cream that's 880.
Okay, this is where I get a little bit confused in some ways, because I do think the food matrix plays a role, like how different foods are structured, the kinds of nutrients that we get in. I do think that calories are the basis for people to follow in terms of general, like mainstream. But there's also evidence to suggest that like glycemic regulation plays a big role. And even Dr. Mike Israetel, when I'm talking to him, like mixed meals are very important, right? So if you're looking at like what Alex Hormozi does, it could almost imply that you eat your 200 grams of protein and then after that, you just do whatever you want. Easier said than done because it almost implies that you could eat that protein early in the day and then the rest of the day just eat junk. The impact that that has on your metabolic rate, on what's called metabolic gridlock, the ability for the mitochondria to use fuel, that may not apply, right? So it's not quite that simple because you're really should be weaving that protein into those meals. For the optimal outcome, you typically do want to have it where it's going to be mixed meals, proteins, fats, carbs, all together, right? So if you had those 2 pounds of turkey that he talks about, really those should be like spaced with each meal, and then whatever makes up the rest of that meal doesn't really matter. But that being said, there's some relatively newer evidence in 2024 biological chemistry study that was talking about like the combination of trans fats mixed with carbohydrates and how it can increase what's called reactive oxygen species, basically oxidative stress within the cell. So for a metabolically unhealthy person, the food quality certainly matters, right? Now this channel is about optimization. I am all about like getting things dialed. So what Alex is saying is not incorrect from a pure calorie standpoint, but he's trying to do this from a flexible perspective. If you do this from a flexible perspective, it can work for a while, but what I would suggest is the best way to obtain flexibility is to probably have a period of time without eating and then doing the things that he's doing in a more consolidated fashion with protein intertwined, right? So rather than waking up and saying, I'm gonna have all my protein now, and then I'm just gonna eat whatever I want, that does add up and it does make sense. But it might work a little bit better if you were to give yourself a little bit of a break from those meals and then consolidate into a smaller block. There's earlier evidence, some of it rodent model, so we can't take it to the bank, that basically like consolidated eating windows or a compressed eating window could be beneficial when it comes down to insulin signaling and whatnot. My concern with this style of eating is it just relies too much on flexibility. He is a very fit person. He is also open about some of the things that he uses to maintain his physique, which is not necessarily realistic for every sort of natural person either. So, and he's aware of that. I'm not in any way saying that he's like tricking people. He's not, like he's open about that stuff. But what we have to look at here is this applies to his audience. And I've had a lot of people ask questions about this. His audience is probably younger, relatively fit people. When I talk to my audience, I have fit people, I have people that are metabolically dysfunctional, people that are really dealing with issues. So we don't want to just follow this as a general guideline. However, from a sustainability standpoint, he's really onto something. Like when you can just say, I've got 800 free calories, it gives you good context of just, I can just enjoy food. The problem is, it's very easy to get 800 calories from fats and carbs left over. And the problem that I have is that it implies that you can consume high amounts of fats and carbohydrates together, which you can. But if the rest of your diet is just made up of fats and carbohydrates, there is this thing called metabolic gridlock. The body preferentially can only utilize fats or carbs at the same time, especially in high amounts. And I'm not fear-mongering, getting down a woo-woo-y weirdo route. Like this is real stuff. It's also the Randall cycle. It's where it's really interesting. You're better off to say, hey, like maybe I'll partition my fats and my carbs. So if I were to extrapolate Alex Hormozi's diet a little bit more, I'd say yes, the foundational 200 grams of protein is probably critical for most people, or the foundational 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. The rest, if you can partition fats and carbs a little separately, that might work better. So the one way that you could level up Alex Hormozi's diet just a little bit while still maintaining that flexibility would be 1 gram per pound of body weight baseline, but then for the protein, but then after that, partition one meal to be a higher fat meal and partition 1 meal or 2 meals to be a higher carb meal. That way we're not running into this mixed meal effect and just allowing ourselves consistent junk food. Anyway, I mean, I get what he's saying. He has flexibility, he has dessert every day. I think that that can be done a lot of different ways. Let's see what else he has to say.
I eat the same breakfast and lunch every day. I start my day with, let's call it a 200 calorie bar, you call it a brownie, it doesn't matter. If I'm traveling, I might not have this with me and I'll grab a Quest bar at the airport, right? 200 calories and 20 grams of protein, one of those bars. And then I have a shake, and this is 30 grams of protein and 160 calories. I'm in for 360 calories for my breakfast. I got 50 grams of protein knocked down already. Then I go to my lunch. I have a pound of turkey, which we already know is 560.
You know, I'm gonna back up for a second. Just on the breakfast, that works, that's fine. Lacking some nutrient quality, I would be concerned that most people would find themselves very hungry, right? So again, he is a dialed dude. I think that is a very, although the protein, the 50 grams of protein is gonna be satiating, the food volume is pretty low. So, I mean, in my eyes, I would say like, okay, add some like real protein to that mix and you might be a little more satiated. Anyway, back to his lunch.
Then I go to my lunch. I have a pound of turkey, which we already know is 560, and I actually only eat half of one of these guys. 1 cup of rice. I now have 150 grams of protein and 1140 in terms of calories that I've eaten so far. Mind you, I have 3,000 calories just to maintain.
First of all, pound of turkey, absolutely can eat. People are saying you can't assimilate that much protein in one sitting. You can, okay? It just is gonna take longer to digest. So if he's eating a pound and that's 100 grams of protein, that's where things get wild, right? Holy cow, that's a lot of protein in one sitting. Can he do that? You know, that's a rough math right there. It's just, yes, he can, but it's going to take, based upon that study that came out in December of 2023, that is going to take about 12 hours to digest. Granted, if he's on some stuff, some performance enhancements, that's going to increase muscle protein synthesis, which might allow him to maybe assimilate a little bit faster. But yes, you can absorb that in one sitting, but understand that it probably will take about 10 to 12 hours to fully trickle into your system and have an effect. So any protein you take in like subsequent hours after that, it's just adding to that trickle effect. And it's probably just taking even longer. So it's not like you take 100 grams in, boom, you assimilate it, it's done. The act of muscle protein synthesis takes a few hours in and of itself outside of digestion. So you can have smaller meals, or you could just have you could have 200 grams of protein in one sitting and then not eat for the rest of the day and probably be okay.
I go to dinner. Dinner is the big flex meal for me. Now, I also tend to eat a pound of protein at dinner. Do I need to? Absolutely not. Do I want to? Absolutely. I love eating protein. I feel good when I eat meat.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad he said this because I think stacking 200 grams of protein, 2 separate 100 gram meals that close together, I don't know if that's really gonna all get assimilated. It might, because he's going into bedtime where maybe it's going to break down. And again, the mixed meal effect, the slow digestion, like it's not gonna go to waste. Protein will not store extra as fat unless your calories are too high. If extra protein puts you over your caloric intake, then other substrates store as fat, but protein doesn't really go through a process to store as fat itself. The protein will go through, do its thing, and it will sort of back burner other substrates, and the back burnered other substrates will store as fat if you are in a caloric surplus, typically.
If you didn't, let's say you were 150 pounds and you'd already eaten 150 grams of protein up to this point, your entire dinner could be whatever you want. Pretty cool, all right? As long as it equaled out to the total amount of calories you want. And I do this also.
You know, he's right there. Like, I wouldn't suggest it. Like, I think you'd be really hungry after just a fat carb dinner. But he is right. Like, your protein needs are met. They're probably still digesting, but I wouldn't recommend that.
And I do this also because then I'm full. If I just eat cookies, I'm usually not full.
Funny, he just said that actually. I'm just glad he mentioned that because if he eats cookies, he's not full. Satiety is key.
So if you're like, where's your greens? I have a multivitamin and I continue to stay alive.
Okay, I want to end on that. I think food quality matters. Okay, and this is where I need to reference something from a longevity perspective. If you look at the rhesus monkeys of Bethesda, Maryland versus Madison, Wisconsin, Herculean study that Dr. Peter Attia and I talked about, also Paul Saladino talks about it a lot too, but basically a caloric deficit from a longevity perspective seems to matter more if the diet is poor. If the diet is good, the caloric deficit doesn't seem to matter as much because the monkeys that ate a nutrient-rich diet didn't benefit from a caloric deficit, whereas the monkeys that ate a crappy diet did benefit from a caloric deficit. And the reason that I say this is that long-term it will matter, okay? And I don't think that he needs to have greens per se, but I would like to see some fruit in there. Micronutrition matters. Nutrient quality matters. And there's people out there that'll say it's what's called a, nutritional fallacy or naturalistic fallacy. Look, at calories are a unit of heat measurement, right? They're heat measurement. It does not factor in what our cells use. It does not factor in insulin sensitivity, membrane flexibility, membrane fluidity, signaling, hormones, all these things. We do need micronutrition. And there is evidence that suggests that a multivitamin is beneficial. So I do think a multivitamin can be hugely beneficial. But I do think that the food matrix long-term and applying whole food principles to your diet is going to be good. Can you develop metabolic issues and insulin resistance without being in a surplus or a state of energy toxicity? I can't really answer that. Most of the evidence points to, like, yes, in some ways, but also no in some ways. For example, like, we really do need to overeat to cause a problem. But what is the scale of overeating? Can we overeat in one meal and cause metabolic damage? I'm inclined to think we can. But I also am inclined to think that the big problems are going to be the wide-angle ones when we look at how often is this happening? How often are we overeating and causing a major surplus of energy toxicity, right? So in the short term, this could work for them. But as mitochondrial health deteriorates and as our efficiency and our levels of reactive oxygen species increase as we get older, I think there's going to be less room for flexibility with this, and you might see it reflect in blood work. So I do think it matters to pay attention to nutrient quality. That's the one major critique I'd have here. But the one thing I agree with him majorly on, protein, protein, protein. It seems to be the bee's knees. I'll see you tomorrow.